When Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, gets a traffic ticket and fights it in court, the liberal anti-Trump judge attacks her physically. Moments later, FBI Director Kash Patel storms the courtroom. The morning of March 27, 2025, dawned gray and humid over Miami, Florida, the kind of sticky heat that clung to the skin and frayed tempers. Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary, was behind the wheel of her rented black SUV, navigating the bustling streets of downtown Miami on her way to a press event at a local community center. Her blonde hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail, her navy blazer crisp despite the humidity, and her sharp green eyes scanned the road with the focus of someone used to juggling high-stakes situations. She'd risen to prominence as a fierce defender of the Trump administration, her quick wit and unyielding loyalty earning her the press secretary role at a remarkably young age. But today, her focus wasn't on briefing rooms or reporters. It was on a minor traffic stop that would spiral into a courtroom showdown no one saw coming. As Karoline approached a busy intersection near the courthouse district, her phone buzzed with a text from her deputy. "Event starts at 10, don't be late." She glanced at the screen for a split second, just long enough to miss the light turning red. A Miami PD cruiser parked on the corner, flashed its lights, and Officer Daniel Rivera, a stocky man with a stern expression, motioned for her to pull over. Karoline sighed, her shoulders tensing as she eased the SUV to the curb. She rolled down her window, offering a polite smile as Rivera approached, his ticket book already in hand. "Ma'am, you ran a red light back there," Rivera said, his tone clipped. "License and registration, please." Karoline nodded, reaching for her purse. "I'm so sorry, officer. I got distracted for a moment." "It won't happen again." She handed over her documents, her White House ID catching Rivera's eye. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing, scribbling the ticket with a frown. $250 fine, he said, tearing off the slip. "You can pay online or contest it in court. Have a good day." Karoline took the ticket, her jaw tightening. She wasn't one to let things slide. Not in politics, and certainly not in life. "I'll contest it," she muttered to herself, tucking the ticket into her purse. She had a press event to get to, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 weeks later, on April 10, 2025, Karoline stood in the Miami-Dade County Courthouse, her heels clicking on the polished marble floor as she entered room 5B. The courtroom was a modest space, its wood-paneled walls and flickering fluorescent lights, a far cry from the grandeur of federal courthouses she'd seen in D.C. The gallery was sparsely filled, a few locals, a bored reporter from the Miami Herald, and a handful of court staff. But the tension in the air was palpable. Karoline had chosen to represent herself, her legal background from Georgetown law giving her the confidence to fight the ticket on her own. She wore a tailored gray suit, her blonde hair swept into a low bun, and her expression was one of steely determination. At the bench sat Judge Marisol Vega, a wiry woman in her early 50s with jet black hair and a reputation for volatility. Vega was a known liberal, her anti-Trump rants on X a poorly kept secret in Miami's legal circles. She'd been appointed to the bench during the Obama years, and her rulings often leaned heavily against conservative figures, a pattern that had drawn scrutiny but never consequences, until today. Vega's dark eyes narrowed as Karoline approached the defense table, her lips curling into a sneer. Well, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "If it isn't the White House's little mouthpiece, Karoline Leavitt, here to waste my time over a traffic ticket." Karoline met her gaze evenly, unfazed by the hostility. "Your Honor, I'm here to contest the citation. I believe there were mitigating circumstances." "Mitigating circumstances?" Vega interrupted, barking a harsh laugh. "You ran a red light, Miss Leavitt. The officer's report says you were on your phone. That's reckless driving in my book, and I don't care if you're Trump's press secretary or the Queen of England. You're not above the law." The gallery stirred, the reporter scribbling notes as Karoline took a deep breath, her voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, I was glancing at a work-related text, a matter of national importance. I wasn't texting or distracted for more than a second. The light changed faster than I anticipated, and I have dashcam footage to show the timing was off." Vega's face darkened, her hands clenching the edges of her bench. "Dashcam footage? You think you can waltz in here with your fancy tech and your White House title and make this go away?" I've seen your type privileged conservatives who think the rules don't apply. You're nothing but a Trump lackey in a cheap suit. The courtroom gasped, the air thickening with tension. Karoline's eyes narrowed, but she kept her composure, her voice steady. With all due respect, Your Honor, my position has nothing to do with this case. I'm asking for a fair hearing based on the evidence. Fair? Vega spat, her voice rising to a shriek. You want to talk about fair? Your boss has spent years undermining democracy. And you're his little cheerleader. You don't deserve fairness. You deserve to be taught a lesson. She slammed her gavel so hard the wood cracked, a splinter flying onto the floor. The court clerk, a young woman named Sophia, flinched, her hands trembling as she typed the transcript. Karoline stood her ground, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. Your Honor, your comments are inappropriate and biased. I request a recusal if you can't remain impartial. Vega's face contorted with rage, her eyes blazing as she leapt from her chair, her black robes billowing like a storm cloud. Recusal? You dare question my authority in my own courtroom? She stormed around the bench, her heels clicking furiously, and before anyone could react, she lunged at Karoline, grabbing her by the arm and shoving her against the defense table. You little Trump bitch, Vega screamed, her nails digging into Karoline's skin as she raised a hand to strike. The gallery erupted in chaos, spectators gasping and shouting as Sophia scrambled to hit the panic button under her desk. Karoline twisted free, her blazer tearing at the sleeve, and stumbled back, her green eyes wide with shock but her voice steady. You just assaulted me in open court, she shouted, pointing at Vega. This is on record. Vega froze, her chest heaving, her face a mask of fury and sudden fear as she realized what she'd done. But before she could respond, the courtroom doors burst open with a thunderous bang, and FBI Director Kash Patel stormed in, his broad frame filling the doorway. Patel, a 45-year-old Trump appointee, with a reputation for relentless loyalty and a no-nonsense approach, was flanked by 6 FBI agents in tactical gear, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. The gallery fell silent, the air electric with anticipation as Patel's voice boomed through the room. Judge Marisol Vega, this court is now under federal investigation, Patel announced, his dark eyes locking onto Vega with laser focus. Agents, apprehend her now. Vega's face went pale, her hands trembling as she backed toward her chambers. You can't do this, she shrieked, her voice cracking with panic. I'm a judge, I have immunity. But the agents were already moving, 2 of them grabbing her arms and forcing her to her knees as she thrashed and screamed. This is a setup, you Trump cronies framed me. Karoline, still catching her breath, straightened her torn blazer, her expression a mix of shock and vindication, as she watched the scene unfold. Patel approached her, his voice low but firm. You okay, Karoline? I'll live, she replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. What's going on, Kash? Patel's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to Vega as the agents cuffed her. We've been investigating Vega for months. She's been taking bribes from the Sinaloa cartel, millions in offshore accounts to throw cases involving their operatives. We got a tip she'd be in court today, and when I heard she was presiding over your case, I knew we had to move fast. The gallery erupted in stunned whispers, the reporter's pen flying across his notebook, as Vega's screams echoed through the room. Lies, she shouted, her voice hoarse. This is a Trump conspiracy. You'll pay for this, Patel, all of you. As the agents dragged Vega toward the exit, Patel pulled a tablet from his briefcase, swiping to a series of documents that he handed to Karoline. Bank records, he said, his voice grim. Deposits from shell companies linked to Sinaloa, timed with her rulings in at least a dozen drug cases. She let cartel members walk free while throwing the book at anyone tied to conservatives, especially Trump allies. We've got wiretaps too. She was recorded promising to bury your case if you fought the ticket. Karoline scanned the files, her legal mind racing as she pieced it together. So she attacked me because she knew I'd fight back and expose her? Exactly, Patel said. Nodding, she panicked, thought she could intimidate you into dropping the case. But you held your ground, and now she's done. The courtroom was still reeling as the agents sealed Vega's chambers, pulling out boxes of files and laptops for evidence. Sophia, the clerk, burst into tears, her hands shaking as she spoke to an agent. "She made me shred documents," she sobbed. "She said she'd ruin my life if I didn't." The reporter in the gallery was on his phone, dictating a breaking story to his editor. Corrupt Miami judge arrested in court, ties to Sinaloa cartel exposed by FBI Director Kash Patel. Vicky's final moments in the courtroom were a spectacle of desperation. As the agents led her out in cuffs, she turned to Karoline, her face contorted with rage. "You think this changes anything?" she spat. "The cartels will come for you, Leavitt. You and your precious Trump administration. You're all dead." Karoline didn't flinch, her voice steady as she replied, "Threats won't save you, Judge. Justice will." The doors slammed shut behind Vega, her screams fading into the corridor as the gallery sat in stunned silence. The fallout from Judge Marisol Vega's arrest on April 10, 2025, was nothing short of seismic, sending shockwaves through Florida's judicial system and beyond. By the following morning, the story had exploded across national headlines, dominating cable news chyrons and social media feeds. "Corrupt Miami judge tied to Sinaloa cartel arrested in court," screamed the Miami Herald's front page, while conservative outlets like Fox News ran triumphant segments, hailing Karoline Leavitt as a hero of justice. Progressive commentators, meanwhile, scrambled to distance themselves from Vega, decrying her actions as a betrayal of liberal values, though some whispered conspiracies about a Trump-orchestrated setup. The truth, however, was far more damning and far less partisan than any pundit could have imagined. Vega's arrest triggered a sprawling investigation that rippled across Florida's courts, exposing a network of corruption that had festered for years. Federal agents, led by FBI Director Kash Patel, descended on courthouses from Miami to Jacksonville, armed with warrants and wiretap evidence that pointed to a web of judges, clerks, and even prosecutors tied to the Sinaloa cartel. Vega, it turned out, was just the tip of the iceberg. Her offshore accounts, holding a staggering $3.2 million in cartel money, funneled through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, were frozen within hours of her arrest. The funds seized as evidence in what prosecutors called one of the largest judicial corruption cases in state history. Bank records revealed a pattern of deposits, each coinciding with rulings that let cartel operatives walk free while innocent defendants, often targeted for their political affiliations, were buried under harsh sentences. The scope of Vega's influence was chilling. Over the past 5 years, she'd presided over more than 200 cases involving drug trafficking, money laundering, and related charges. A preliminary review by federal investigators flagged at least 60 of those cases for potential misconduct, with dozens of wrongfully convicted defendants now facing the prospect of freedom. One such defendant, a 28-year-old mechanic named Luis Alvarez, had been sentenced to 15 years for possession with intent to distribute, a charge based on fabricated evidence Vega had allowed. Despite objection, "I knew something was wrong," Alvarez told reporters from his cell, his voice trembling with hope. "She wouldn't let my lawyer speak. Now I might see my daughter again." Across the state, families of the incarcerated began filing appeals, their attorneys citing Vega's corruption as grounds for overturned conviction. For Karoline Leavitt, the immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of vindication and reflection. The traffic ticket that had sparked the entire ordeal, a $250 fine for running a red light, was dismissed the following day by Judge Robert Ellison, a soft-spoken veteran jurist who'd been assigned to clear Vega's docket. Ellison, a gray-haired man in his late 60s, called Karoline into his chambers before the hearing, his expression one of genuine remorse. "Miss Leavitt," he said, his voice heavy, "on behalf of this court, I apologize for what you endured. Judge Vega's conduct was an affront to justice, and I'm dismissing the citation with prejudice." "You're free to go," Karoline nodded, her torn blazer still hanging in her closet as a reminder of the battle she'd fought. "Thank you, Your Honor," she replied, her tone steady but her green eyes flashing with quiet triumph. "I just hope this leads to real change." That evening, Karoline returned to the White House, her torn blazer a badge of honor as she stepped into the James S. Brady press briefing room. The room was packed, the air buzzing with anticipation as reporters from every major outlet jostled for position, their cameras trained on the podium. Karoline took her place, her blonde hair swept into a low bun, her gray suit replaced by a sharp white blazer that seemed to signal a fresh start. She adjusted the microphone, her gaze sweeping the room with the confidence of a woman who just toppled a corrupt empire. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady and resonant, cutting through the hum of the press corps. Today's events in Miami were not just about a traffic ticket, they were about exposing corruption at the highest levels of our judicial system. Judge Marisol Vega assaulted me in open court, but more importantly, she betrayed the public trust by taking millions in bribes from the Sinaloa cartel. Her actions endangered lives, destroyed families, and undermined the rule of law. But let this be a message to anyone who thinks they're above accountability. No one is above the law, not even a judge. The room erupted in a flurry of questions, hands shooting up as reporters shouted over each other. "Karoline, do you think Vega targeted you because of your role in the Trump administration?" called a correspondent from CNN. Karoline's lips curved into a faint smile, her eyes sharp. "I think Vega targeted me because she knew I'd fight back, and she was terrified of what I might uncover. She underestimated me, and she underestimated the pursuit of justice." Another reporter, this one from the Washington Post, pressed further. "What's next for the investigation? Are there more judges involved?" Karoline nodded, her expression serious. "The FBI under Director Kash Patel is leading a comprehensive investigation into Florida's judicial system. I have full confidence that anyone involved in this corruption will face the consequences, no matter their position." As the briefing concluded, Karoline stepped away from the podium, her heart still racing from the day's events. She'd faced down a corrupt judge, survived a physical assault, and helped expose a cartel-backed conspiracy, all over a traffic ticket. It was a story she'd tell for years, a testament to her resilience and the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. Back in Miami, Marisol Vega sat in a federal holding cell, her once impeccable judicial robes replaced by a faded orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her wiry frame. The cell was a stark, concrete box, its fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting harsh shadows on the graffiti-scratched walls. Vega sat on the edge of a metal cot, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her dark eyes staring blankly at the floor. Her empire of bribes and cartel deals, built over years of backroom meetings and secret wire transfers, had crumbled in a single day, leaving her with nothing but the cold reality of her new life behind bars. She'd thought she was untouchable, a judge with the power to bend the law to her will, protected by the Sinaloa cartel's money and influence. She'd dismissed Karoline Leavitt as a minor annoyance, a pretty face in a suit who'd fold under pressure. But she'd underestimated Karoline's tenacity, her refusal to back down, even when Vega's nails had dug into her arm. Even when the gavel had cracked with the force of her rage. And she'd underestimated the relentless pursuit of justice that followed, led by a press secretary who'd turned a traffic ticket into a takedown of epic proportions. Now, as Vega awaited her arraignment on charges of bribery, obstruction of justice, and assault, she knew the cartel wouldn't save her. They'd already cut ties, their operatives vanishing into the shadows as the FBI closed in. Her only hope was a plea deal, a chance to trade information for a lighter sentence. But even that felt like a long shot. The walls were closing in, and for the first time in years, Marisol Vega felt the weight of her own crimes bearing down on her, a burden she could no longer escape.